Games Workshop has done a faction focus on the Space Marines, and in amongst that, a lot of information has come out about the core rules in 11th edition, and that's what I'm focusing on. There was an hour-long YouTube interview where they talked about Space Marine detachments, mainly for Divergent chapters. It's something that could have really done with a PowerPoint slide to understand what they're talking about, or showing off the particular stratagems. They talked about many things not in the Warhammer community article. Of course, if you want to learn more about the Divergent chapters like the Space Wolves and the Black Templars and have it in PowerPoint form, I'm sure Auspex Tactics will provide soon enough. I'm not a Space Wolf player, of course I'm not ill, and I'm not a Black Templar player or a Blood Angels player despite my appearance. I'm a Deathwatch player. We'll talk about Deathwatch in this article and release later on in the video. We're focusing on the core rules. First of all, detachments. Some of the detachments do not have any stratagems.
There's a bunch of enhancements you can give to the librarians as well. These are effectively upgrades for your librarians, and you've got a whole suite of different things you can do with them.
Correct. So this detachment doesn't have stratagems. In lieu of that, you get 5 enhancements, where you really get to tool your army to be fit for whatever you want that unit to be.
So if we were thinking, okay, I'm combining 3 different detachments, and I'm going to have 18 stratagems available, maybe not. The Librarius Conclave, which you may recognize from the Grotmus detachment of the same name and same ability, is not going to have any of their stratagems, but it will have 5 enhancements, 1 for each psychic discipline. You can take 2 enhancements in a 1000 point game and 4 enhancements if you're playing up to 2000 points. So we know that not all detachments are stacking more and more stratagems, and the Librarius Conclave may be a 1-point detachment. It's something extra cool for the units led by a librarian. Have a Terminator librarian with your Terminators. Have a regular librarian like the one in the Armageddon starter set with your regular Space Marines with bolters. Then they get a bit better depending on which psychic discipline you pick as to which benefit you get. If you wanted to have reroll hit rolls of 1 and reroll wound rolls of 1, maybe you want to play Ceramite Sentinels. As long as one of the models in your unit is in area terrain, your unit gets to reroll hit rolls of 1 and wound rolls of 1. So I'd pick something else, or maybe combine it with Ceramite Sentinels. Never do Divination, and instead pick Telepathy. You ignore any -1s to hit, you ignore the ballistic skill penalty from the benefit of cover. So let's talk about Stealth. Stealth is just the benefit of cover. Not -1 to be hit, the benefit of cover. -1 ballistic skill to enemies attacking them. So that means that Stealth does not stack with the benefit of cover to make enemies -1 ballistic skill and -1 to hit. That would turn guard and Tau shooting into hitting on a 6+. This was definitely a problem we had in 8th edition, where you could stack multiple penalties on a unit beyond the -1. So it could be -2 or -3. Yes, a 6 always hit, but having an Alpha Legion stealthy army or a Raven Guard stealthy army and saying, hey, you can't shoot me unless you roll a 6 to hit, meant that some games were very quickly decided. Just roll more 6s, Lamau. If you didn't do that, you didn't win the game. The -1 ballistic skill will stack if there is some other ability that does make enemies -1 to hit. Blinding Radiance for the Adeptus Sororitas is what I'm thinking of. That will stack, because changes to ballistic skill are different to modifiers to the hit roll. You cannot modify a hit roll by more than 1 point. That's a 10th edition rule, I assume also an 11th edition rule, unless they've really decided to unlearn the lessons of past editions. But changing a ballistic skill from 4+ to 5+, and then also making the hit roll -1, that would work together. Lone Operative is basically the same as before, just worded a bit differently. You cannot shoot an enemy unit with Lone Operative over 12 inches. That's how it was in 10th edition. In 11th edition it says, you are not visible unless you are within 12 inches. So if you have an ability that does not require line of sight, you can target that Lone Operative. The exception is indirect fire. That still cannot be fired at a Lone Operative. Though I was partial to the idea of, hey, carpet bomb that sort of area, we know there's a guy somewhere there. But then my Exorcist would become a super sniper. We know what surge moves are in 10th edition. They are a special kind of move, you can't do it while battle shocked, and you can end in engagement range. In 10th edition, because of alternating activations, starting with the player who's not taking their turn, if there were no charges, you could surge move into an enemy and you would fight before them. In 11th edition, the active player gets to pick a unit first. So if you surge move into the enemy, your opponent will fight before you. That may depend whether you want to surge move. You can't just rush metamorphs into a very tanky enemy. You'll get squished. If they can kill your toughness 4 body. Everyone can kill a toughness 4 1 wound body. But surge moves are a normal move, where you must try and finish the move engaged with the closest enemy unit. Similar to 10th edition. But engagement range in 11th edition is 2 inches. If you are within that, and you can enter that with a surge move, then you're fighting. So a Khorne Berserker that has a d6 plus 2 surge move in 10th edition, and you have to end within 1 inch of the enemy, so it's almost d6 plus 3. In 11th edition, it's like d6 plus 4. Because you can end a surge move within 2 inches of the enemy, and now you're in engagement range. That's very scary. Thinking of very scary things? Battle Shock. Battle Shock is persisting.
Battle Shock now isn't something that fades off. You have to continually test to be unbattle shocked. In previous editions of the game, it works similar to pinning, where you would have to constantly test to see if you're unpinned. Otherwise, you would fire snapshots and you'd be stuck in place. Battle Shock now persists. Once you are battle shocked, you must test to become earn your unbattle shockedness.
Battle Shock doesn't go away. You have to pass the leadership test to stop being battle shocked. This makes the ability of the Genestealer Cult Patriarch better. Go near the enemy, doesn't matter if it's your turn or the enemy turn, area battle shock. Those enemy units can't control objectives, they can't use stratagems while they're battle shocked. We know from the interview that it works much the same way. You can't control objectives, and you can't use stratagems while battle shocked. But rather than you doing that in your turn and the enemy recovering at the start of their turn, battle shocked units stay battle shocked until you pass that leadership test. So a Tyrannid Shadow in the Warp can cripple a low leadership army, stopping them from scoring victory points for a lot of the game. Do it in their turn 2 before they can score, and they may not be able to score in their turn 3 or turn 4 with units. If you have any abilities that remove Battle Shock, like the Genestealer Cult Magus can do, and like the Sister Dialogus can do, they become actually usable. I used the Dialogus ability one time in 10th edition to remove Battle Shock from a Seraphim unit so they could do a secondary mission that needed an action. People have wanted more impactful Battle Shock. Maybe not you, but people. Something mentioned in the interview clip just now, describing Battle Shock as like being pinned in past editions, and in like 6th edition when you were pinned, you could only fire snapshots. If that is part of Battle Shock in 11th edition, then Battle Shock is even more impactful. You can't have a unit continue to go around shooting things if they're battle shocked. It would have no negative impact on melee units. And we don't know if this part of Battle Shock is an actual part of Battle Shock or just an awkward comparison. There may be changes to how actions work. Maybe in 11th edition you can shoot and still do an action. We haven't seen the 11th edition requirements for actions. But if it is the make you fire snapshot aspect, potentially, of Battle Shock, that makes you not able to shoot and do an action with a Battle Shocked unit. Overwatch is going to change in 11th edition. It will be done at the end of the enemy movement phase, and you don't have to fire at a unit that moved in that phase. One of your units shoots at any enemy unit, but you fire with snap shooting. You can have critical hits, like sustained hits and lethal hits, but you cannot have rerolls on the hit roll. So Val and her gang are sad, half sad. You can still have rerolls on the wound rolls. Also, when snap shooting, you cannot start an action. Having this section makes me think maybe it's very common to shoot and then start doing an action. Something that Battle Shock would prevent. But Battle Shock units could do actions unless they shoot. Whereas other units can shoot and do an action. We'll have to see. I want to see more of this mission deck. But even though snap shooting is part of Overwatch, if you were doing an ongoing action, you could fire Overwatch and it wouldn't stop the action from working. It's only that you cannot start an action. Nothing to say it stops actions working. Heroic Intervention is updated. There are 2 versions of Heroic Intervention. Version 1 is much like we know it today. Any one of your unengaged units within 12 inches of the enemy can do Heroic Intervention. Not vehicles, unless it is also a character vehicle. But regular characters, infantry, any mounted unit, any monster can heroically intervene. Then you resolve a charge move. So you roll the dice, maybe you don't get into engagement range of the enemy. I have a video explaining how charges are going to work in 11th edition and the number that you have to roll. It's like shooting, where you have to be in range of the number rolled. That is then a valid target. Think of it like that. So it's not, oh, I could move within engagement range. No, you can only move into engagement range of valid targets. They're not a valid target unless they're in range. The range is the number of inches you rolled on the 2d6. So like you can't shoot an enemy that's 26 inches away with your 24-inch gun, you can't charge an enemy that's 8 inches away if you rolled a 6. If you leap to defend, you can only charge enemy units that made a charge move, and yes, are within the maximum distance you rolled on the charge move. You countercharge the enemy. The other version is Into the Fray, and this second version is very much as I predicted. You can charge enemies in 6 inches, even if they didn't charge. It's a limit of 6 inches, so there's no point picking an enemy that's 9 inches away because the maximum you could go is 6 inches. And we've seen similar stratagems in the Wrath of the Rock detachment in 10th edition. The enemy waddles into your objective building and outscores your combat unit with objective control. You charge them and you kill them. You can charge any unit with Into the Fray, as long as they're within 6 inches, the point being they did not need to make a charge move against your army this turn. It's not countercharging, it's just charging in the enemy turn. That costs an extra command point, so it's 1 command point for Leap to Defend, 2 command points for Into the Fray. And as Heroic Intervention is all one stratagem, you couldn't Leap to Defend with one unit and do Into the Fray with another unit. You have used that stratagem this phase. The charge bonus to fight first still seems to be there, whereas it isn't in 10th edition. For all purposes, you have made a charge move, you get to fight first. However, in 11th edition, you alternate fight first starting with the enemy. So they charge with Unit A into your Unit B, you intervene with Unit C. Unit C gets fight first. But Unit A charged has fight first, they are part of the active player's army. Unit A attacks, and maybe they kill Unit C. Any survivors of Unit C fight next as they have fight first. It's still good to do, and having fight first will be useful. I'm looking at Final Day armies that have a lot of fight first between Lictors and Death Leaper and the Genestealer Cult Locust, and thinking that the enemy will not like to charge more than one of those units in a turn. But despite the rules changes, Heroic Intervention will feel much the same as it does in this edition. The enemy is going to fight before you, but now we have the option of walking into combat and getting fight first against a unit that doesn't have it because that enemy unit didn't charge. You get to smack them first in their turn. So 11th edition is looking like a very combat-focused edition. I have laid out the terrain for 11th edition on the board, and there are a lot of sight lines, including right into the enemy deployment zone from your deployment zone. There are some big gaps in each player's deployment zone, and a lot more big empty spaces around the table. But there is a lot of terrain. It's like they've taken a 10th edition tournament board and swapped all the objective markers for another piece of terrain. That's lots of terrain. That's why the Ceramite Sentinels that gives you bonuses if you're in terrain is looking like a much better detachment. And there's a lot of line of sight blocking terrain, and the hidden rule is there to stop you from getting shot. You cannot target enemies over 15 inches if they're in cover, and they haven't shot in the current player turn or the previous player turn. Real gameplay and testing of 11th edition will show how melee focused 11th edition is. While no slant to melee or shooting is good, I prefer a melee over ranged bias because at least you have to reach the enemy instead of pointing at them and declaring, they are dead. Speaking of, what about the Deathwatch? For the Space Marines, they have more detachments. Each of the Divergent chapters will have 3 detachments. Many of the detachments are looking disappointingly like remakes, or essentially copies of Grotmus detachments as our new ones. because their idea of an existing detachment is one in a codex or a campaign book, not one that was released for free on the Warhammer community website. So the Librarius Conclave we have already seen, but now it comes without stratagems. 5 enhancements only, all 6 stratagems are gone. If you liked that detachment and the stratagems, that's gonna suck. If you wanted to combine detachments to supercharge certain parts of your army, there is another Blood Angel detachment about the Death Company, and it cannot be combined with other detachments focusing on the Death Company, so you can't supercharge your Death Company troops. Same for the Orcs, getting 2 remakes of detachments that already existed, Tactical Brigade and Mordaka, and a new one which is a lot like the Blitz Brigade, but you cannot combine it with the Blitz Brigade. All the Divergent chapters were mentioned in this Games Workshop article, except for the Deathwatch. Deathwatch are absent. So, are they trying to put us back into Imperial Agents in totality? Or are we going to get mentioned later at the same time as Grey Knights, who are Space Marines but not Space Marines? Deathwatch currently live on an index. All of their unit rules are free on the Warhammer community website. So if they try and put us back into Imperial Agents, I have an idea of how they could sort of fix it. If the Deathwatch were only in Imperial Agents, have an add-on to the Ordo Xenos detachment. Say, if your army is Adeptus Astartes, change the Imperial Agents faction keyword for Adeptus Astartes on all of the Deathwatch units. Then the Deathwatch units, even though we're Imperial Agents, can benefit from other Space Marine detachment abilities and stratagems. This is how it worked in the Crucible of Champions in the Maelstrom book. There was a Deathwatch character in the Imperial Agents section, but you could change their Imperial Agents keywords for Adeptus Astartes keywords. That would need extra tweaks to accommodate attaching characters and going in transports. There needs to be compatible rules, because if you're one of the people who thinks that Deathwatch are just black armored Space Marines and they would be fine as Imperial Agent units, no. Then you can't go in Land Raiders or Impulsors, because they don't have the Adeptus Astartes keyword. They can't be led by characters like a Deathwatch Chaplain and a Deathwatch Librarian. Those are not in Imperial Agents, those are Adeptus Astartes characters. They don't have compatible keywords. You cannot have an Adeptus Astartes Chaplain leading an Imperial Agents Deathwatch kill team. And if you're using the Imperial Agents allying rule, you can only add a couple of kill team units into a Space Marine army as allies. And if they're not Adeptus Astartes, they cannot use stratagems. Would you say a Space Marine army with 1 Black Templar unit is a Black Templar army? Does it fit the theme? You have Librarians and Tactical Squads and 1 Emperor's Champion. Would that satisfy Black Templars players? Right, I can't imagine that it would. Maybe Games Workshop will try again to push the Deathwatch into Imperial Agents and only have us exist as 1 kill team and a Corvus Blackstar and maybe a Watchmaster, and that be everything. If that happens, we kick off again. It seemed to work last time to get the index back with the Black Spear Task Force. So while we can, before bullying may need to be applied, use the super fun Space Marine detachments with your Deathwatch, the Bastion Task Force, and fly around in the Corvus Black Stars doing super mega death. Have a great day of 40k.